Zak Brown, hello and welcome to Sky Sports F1's Sky IndyCar. Thank you so much for joining us. First and foremost, as a racer at heart, great to see IndyCars back on track at St. Pete.
100%. It was a pretty good race. Not as good as we would have liked. I think strategy didn't fall our way, but it was great to see a new media partner who is already making a big difference for our sport.
Well, that was going to be what I was going to lead on. The talk, the buzz, the energy around this 2025 season, underpinned by the new collaboration with Fox. Just from your perspective, how important has that been, and how much of a success was the weekend?
Yeah, critical. There's a long list, like in any business, of things that I think we can do to improve our great sport. And number one on that was finding the right media partner, specifically in North America, given it's primarily a North American racing series. And Fox killed it. They the graphics, the promotion, the way they featured three drivers, in the Super Bowl, which is the biggest event in North America, huge broadcast reach. It was everything you'd hoped it would be. Programming, promotion, new way to show the sport. They had F1 type graphics, and I'm not surprised because Eric Shanks, who's the CEO, I've known for quite some time, and he actually kind of grew up in the business, if you'd like, with Chase Carey and David Hill, and of course Chase did Formula One, and David Hill's responsible for the enhanced broadcast, if you'd like, in the early days of Formula One here when Liberty took over. So to see Eric kind of clearly watch Formula One and go, that's pretty good, let's bring that over, is something that I've been advocating we should get IndyCar and Formula One more closely together. So it was great. Very nice TV rating, up 45%. I think, other than the Indy 500, the biggest IndyCar TV rating in over a decade. So great start, but we need to continue to work hard as a sport.
Absolutely. Now, Fox aside, all change at the helm in terms of Arrow McLaren. You've got Tony Kanaan there. In terms of bringing TK in, he brings a huge amount to the team. Have you seen any initial changes? I know he talked a lot about that sort of collective attitude, that culture that he's trying to drive over the weekend at St. Pete.
Absolutely. I've always been a fan of having former racers and specifically champions, in leadership roles. It's very much what we had with Gilles de Ferran in Formula One. A championship racing driver just knows what great looks like, knows what bad looks like, knows how to rally the team, knows how to communicate well, knows how to listen well, and has a really good understanding of the environment that needs to be created. So Tony's done a fantastic job, has created a lot of energy. The team looks up to him. He pushes hard. He can talk to the drivers in their language, of course. He's very well known, so the sponsors like him, the media likes him. So he's done a wonderful job, and very excited to have him leading our IndyCar team.
And talking of drivers, obviously you've got a new face in the stable this year, Christian Lundgaard. He got off to a really good start at the weekend just gone. How much time have you spent with Christian? What's he like as a person, and what sort of qualities do you think he's going to bring to the team?
I've spent quite a bit of time with him. I kind of led the recruitment of Christian. I was very impressed when he won his first race in Toronto. He dominated, but the part I was more impressed about is there was a late yellow, and he got shuffled to the back, and it would have been very easy for a young driver who's never won to kind of hit the panic button when they dominated a race, and he carved his way back through the field, didn't do anything silly, and I thought that was a very mature drive. So that drive in particular, he raced with Oscar Piastri, so Oscar had great things to say about him. He's young, he's fast, he's hungry. He doesn't lack confidence, but I like that. I think you want to have the right balance of humility and confidence, and he has that. And I think he, Nolan, and Pato make up a great driver lineup. They're all going to push each other, which is exactly what happened at the weekend.
Yeah, things didn't get off to the best of starts for Pato, but we know his quality. We know that he will bounce back. But a really good, strong start for Nolan Siegel as well, especially in qualifying.
Yeah, if I look at the weekend, I'm not worried about Pato. So, we can just write that one off as not a great weekend for him, but I think he's proven what he's capable of. So I was more, let's hope Christian does what I think he'll do, and Nolan. And Christian was on it right away. Nolan was on it right away. You know what I really liked about what I saw out of Nolan was his first laps in each session. He was just on it right away. Obviously, he got hit from behind from Will Power, who since is called and apologized, which is very classy, which is why Will's a multi-champion. So, these things happen. First race of the year, street races, things of that nature. And then, Pato, I think what I was happy about Pato was, he qualified 23rd. And the IndyCar Championship is won by having less bad weekends, and you're going to have them. So I was really happy he went from 23rd to 11th, because maybe the very aggressive Pato in the past might have had a front wing come off out of his rush to get to the front. But, as I said to him, if you had an 11th place car, bring it home in 11th. And so I was very happy with that drive. So overall, I don't think we got the results on paper that we deserved. But when I look at it from my seat, I was happy with, pretty much all aspects, other than, some things just didn't fall our way.
Yeah, it's very much where you finish when you're not winning in terms of the hunt for the crown. I've heard Pato talking about that openly, consistency. And when you look at what it takes to beat Chip Ganassi or Team Penske, is that very much what you're targeting this year? Those
yeah, and it's consistency. Obviously, Andretti, Mike Shank's team did a fantastic job, who are obviously linked up with Ganassi now. So those are obviously the two teams that have been winning all the championships. But Andretti's always a threat. Mike Shank, and that's the beautiful thing about IndyCar is, kind of at any weekend, everyone's potentially a threat. And I think, that's the difference between IndyCar and F1. F1, it doesn't matter if you finish 11th or 20th, you get 0 points. In IndyCar, you get points in every position. So, that 11th place finish versus a 17th versus a 23rd is ultimately where you win the championship. Pato won as many races as the championship winner last year, but it was the average finish that caught us out.
Now, we've talked about Fox, we've talked about St. Pete. Just whilst you're here, with the direction of IndyCar now focused on the new car, there's a lot of talk about Honda and their involvement in the championship moving forward. How important is it to keep your engine manufacturers, to attract new manufacturers, and also to bring that new car for the championship?
Yeah, very. No one wants a spec engine series, so you want 2, 3, 4 manufacturers. So we need Honda to stay. Obviously, we're a Chevy team, and then the new car is long overdue. This car is over a decade old. It's had a lot of facelifts. Bolt this on, bolt that on, bolt this on. And at a time where every other racing series, Formula One obviously does it annually, Formula E does it every 4 or 5 years, you've got NASCAR, IMSA, WEC, we have a tired race car that needs to be upgraded. Give us something to talk about. Give us something new. Bring that technology back. The racing's great, but it's kind of like a hotel room. You do need to modernize them. Just because the roof isn't leaking doesn't mean it doesn't need new carpet and a refresh. Otherwise, the new hotel across the street is going to end up getting all your customers. So I think we're long overdue for a new car. But the great news is one is coming.
Zach, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks so much for your insight, and best of luck for round 2 at Thermal.
Thank you very much.
I'm delighted also to be joined by the new star behind the camera. He's a star behind the wheel, but he's also a star with the microphone now, Jack Harvey. Jack, before we dive into everyone else's performance at this weekend just gone, how did it go for you?
Well, man, I don't know. I kind of feel like I need you to tell me how you think it went. I've done a couple of interviews about this, and I don't think people realised how late this all came together. I mean, I've been speaking with Fox about it for the entire off season, but how late it came together. I remember when I actually had reached out to you, like you knew that it was happening, just a little bit before, because I was like nervous because I did like no prep for it. And I say prep, I mean like professional prep. Not like my IndyCar knowledge is completely fine. But in terms of like having the headset on, being able to work the radio, like I literally put that on for the first time 2 minutes before practice one started.
And
And because I'm also doing the Indy Next commentary, I ran from the commentary booth to pit lane, and I think that actually was a good thing because I didn't even have time to be nervous.
I think there was
So,
a point that you made when you were talking to Hinch on his pod with Rossi about your legs shaking, that kind of stuff, because
mm,
there is that performer element about live TV. When it's the 10, 9, you're getting that count and you can
oh,
feel the
sure.
adrenaline.
Yeah, so Kevin Lee is like the main commentator on the Indy Next races, and obviously I'm hearing the producer, but also like sat next to Kevin and he's talking. And the bit that blew me away is how people are able to just say what they actually want to say while the producer is talking to them, and whether it's a count in or a reminder, like a count out or something. So, probably very ignorantly on my side, I just thought that people either had it like kind of scripted or they just kind of winged it, which maybe it's a little bit of all those things, but it was significantly harder having a producer talking to you and also that live on TV element, like it's tough, man. And I would say the competitive side of me wants to be good at this. Like I didn't just want to like come and do it. And I know I'm getting the opportunity because of my racing background. However, like I already told Fox, like by the end of the year, I want people to be like, wow, he's actually like good at this. Like this isn't something that like I'm just, you know, casually taking in my stride. Like I have put effort in since St. Pete, ready for thermal. Kind of not the same level of prep as when you're driving, in the sense of like, I'm not in the team every single day because although we're doing the 500 with Dryer, that hasn't obviously started really ramping up yet. But I would say my general prep on all the drivers, I know more about them than what I ever thought I would do. It's been like really good fun. But I saw a few people, tag me in tweets and whatnot, and they were like, "Oh, you look nervous," and I'm like, "Well, yes. Like, let's just break that down. I had no prep. My first audition was on live TV. I'm trying to figure it out on the fly. I'm used to people talking to me on a radio, but not while I'm conversing with someone else. So I just feel like I left St. Pete in a bit of a daze, honestly, because
I
I
just
just
know
really had no idea what went into it.
when I have drivers either on the sofa or in the commentary box, we get to the first commercial break and they're like, whoa, 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 like banging me. And they're like, turn this off,
Yeah,
turn this off.
yeah.
I don't want to hear anything because as soon as they're talking and then the producer starts talking, they stop. It's a bit like sort of rubbing your stomach and patting your head. It's really hard.
Well, and I've used this analogy like recently a lot is especially on ovals, you've got a spotter. And for anyone who doesn't know what a spotter is, it's someone who's standing right at the top of the grandstand, basically just giving you a general overview of what's happening in front of you, what's happening behind you, just from a safety perspective and whatnot. And at Indy, you have two spotters. So I'm used to a lot of people talking on the radio. The thing that I'm not used to doing is it'd be like us being just conversing here and then having someone in my ear talking about something completely different, but still wanting to hear what you've got to say. Because if you drop a nugget, I want to organically be able to lead into that or like ask you about it. And I, if to answer your very first question, how did I think I did? I thought my questions were good, but I think I was so nervous about asking good questions that I probably would need to just work on keeping it a conversation. And I think for anyone who knows me in real life knows that that's like one thing I'm good at. It was just funny that like I was so in the zone on like ask a good question and like I mean even a goofy example. I texted Tim Cindric from Team Penske on Monday and he called me back within like 3 minutes and I'm like, guys, I've been like waiting for this sort of thing for like 10 years and it's like happening. So it's fun. The bit that I think also I just wanted to like hit on quickly, if you don't mind, is I really did have a good time. Like I really have been enjoying working with Fox and whatnot, and I feel super lucky because there's a lot of people that would still love that opportunity. But when I tell people I really enjoyed it, the first thing they say is, "Oh, you don't miss driving then?" And I'm like, guys, let's just assume that if I could be in a car full time,
I would.
I would. But I also think this is a fantastic opportunity, and it's not one that I'm just taking, willy-nilly. I really am putting effort into it. So I just think that there's a nice moment where I would have assumed poorly, clearly, that people would just know that I'd rather be, racing full time,
Mate,
but also respectful to this opportunity.
I'm loving the new sort of it's 1% ice road truckers that it's the TV.
Yeah.
You go in
Well,
Hollywood.
I thought. Yeah, well, I nearly always rock a little bit of stubble, and I'll probably shave it back for race day. I think you've caught me on my like pre shave of a race because not that you thought you were going to get my beard, grow out, but I'm going to give it to you just real quick.
What
So
about
I'm on
Louis
like a
Fox's
7.
moustache? You're not going moustache.
Nah, dude, I trimmed that back. I think there's something creepy about a mustache, if I'm honest with you. So I've set it at a 1, I trim everything, and then about 3 days later, I trim the stash, I clean the neck, trim here, and then I just let it grow back out, and then that's on a 7-day cycle. So
Well,
I know you were curious about my beard game, but that's it. You got it now.
yeah, the viewers are here for those nuggets of information, buddy. But back
Yeah,
to St. Pete. Before we go into the actual race, how difficult is it to follow the race? IndyCar is notoriously difficult in terms of the sort of tactical and strategic game. But when you're down in pit lane and you've got
sure.
everything going on and you're not really sighted on the whole bigger picture. I mean, it's hard enough when you've got all the screens in the comms box, never mind down there. How much do you rely on listening to the commentary and also, trying to source things out yourself?
Yeah, so on my headset, I basically have the actual TV program itself. So I'm watching along with everybody else who's watching on TV, basically, and listening along. On my left ear is where I have my producer. Maybe they've caught something that I've missed. And to be honest, Eric, my producer, is the guy that I probably am most in conversation with. And people need to remember that for Fox, this is still a new adventure into IndyCar racing and the strategy compared to NASCAR, compared to Formula One is, very, very different actually. So throughout St. Pete, it was one of the times where actually I knew what was happening strategy wise. As soon as that went, based off of the tire deck numbers that some of the teams had, generously shared with me, as soon as it went yellow at the start, I'm like, well, I know what they're all doing, like all race. So I was actually communicating with Eric, telling them like what to be looking out for, just because it was one that was, pretty decisive. It happened early. What St. Pete needed to really spice up strategy again was another yellow mid stint.
Yeah.
Like that's really what that race needed. And then on my jerk cam, which anyone doesn't sure what that is, it's where the guys, holding like a stick but with like a TV monitor. I've actually asked them to give me some different numbers and information on that just to be able to follow the race along a little bit more. And I would say when you're on a team timing stand, you're on the intercom, you're hearing everything they're talking about, fuel numbers, etc. Now, and this is kind of a goofy thing, but like I literally have to go and like tap the strategist or an engineer or someone that I know on the team or the appropriate person and just kind of figure out how to get them to tell me their strategy without them specifically telling me their strategy.
You've had to put up with me WhatsApp voice messaging you and that kind of thing. You'll get a flavor of who's going to tell you but not tell you, and then people are
Yeah.
going to tell you to go away.
Well, actually, I mean that's a good point because I feel like there's been times where I've been like really good at being like, hey, like this is a strategy today. Here's what I think, keep an eye out for. And then on some weekends, like when it's going really good, you find like you've got the time to do it. When it's going really bad, you're like, well, I still can like help. It's when you're in that middle bit where you really don't know and you're still just wondering the whole time. So, man, the strategy element of IndyCar racing is really quite interesting. I think for this coming weekend. Thermal is notoriously hard on tires, so I think tire degradation is going to be a huge talking point again. If it goes green, man, I don't know if I would be shocked to see someone do a four stopper.
Well, and when we look at other championships who have pre-season testing, compounds that are presented to them, one of the things with IndyCar is you go to each weekend. You got to like for this weekend, we haven't even got the greens. We got the reds back for the first time.
Yeah,
Yeah, they've been at Barber, but that I think the red. I think I'm right in saying the reds are what we raced on last year, not too far away from that black compound they raced on last year, and then they're bringing a new, black primary tire to thermal, but it's nicknamed the cheese grater, isn't it, in terms
yeah,
of tire deg? But there's so many unknowns there. The engineer, they haven't seen these. They've got a reference from last year, but they didn't have the hybrid on the car.
yep.
It's really hard
Well,
to
and
predict.
yeah, and then actually a lot of the teams were testing in Barber last week or during last week, and a track that a lot of people know, they test that a lot. It was the first time there with a hybrid, and I mean there was quite a lot of yellows and red flags even for people during a testing day, probably more so than what I think you would typically expect at the that level. Why? Because I think the hybrid introduced a lot of setup changes, and I think you notice it at a track that is very flowy, like quick transitions, and Barber's one of them. And actually, some parts of thermal can be that way as well, especially in some of that high speed section. So I think for teams generally trying to figure that out is really tough,
Look,
and it's a track that people don't know super well, like you kind of said. It's not that last year, man, I thought that was a goofy race, like goofy concept, goofy race, didn't like it. So I like that this year is just a normal weekend. But in terms of like Firestone, I actually have a call. So this is the difference from like last year, which I really should have done this anyway. But I have a call with Firestone this afternoon to be like, what's happening with the tire? What are you expecting? Is it the same as last year, or what's it similar reference to? Because the chances are at this stage, I've still driven whatever the reference tire is.
yeah, and that's the these compounds do appear and reappear, but it's hard to draw comparisons because it's not a like for like. Right, let's talk about St. Pete really quickly. How surprised were you when you saw the starting lineup to see Scotty Mack start on the blacks? Because we
I
knew
thought that was a good move.
you thought it was a good move.
Yeah, actually, I was talking to the guys about this and to like James and Will and Townsend and whatnot, and I think when you're starting on pole, it can be a really fantastic thing. It can also sometimes be like pretty tough thing because if you started on the alternate tire, do you want to be the guy who started on pole and box on like lap 3 to 6? I mean, that is a unbelievably risky move. I kind of felt like of the people that I could have guessed, I was surprised that more people didn't start on the black. It seemed like a lot of the field went alternate tires. Why did they do that? It was literally because if they got a yellow flag early, essentially it's a
I
free
suppose
pit stop.
hindsight's a wonderful thing because we can go, it's St. Pete, there was always going to be a yellow.
Yeah,
No, but it could easily have not been a yellow.
man, it could have. So I think St. Pete hasn't been yellow free in its history.
Yeah.
And really what it just gave everybody essentially was a free pit stop. So when they go out on their blacks or their harder tire, some people got an absolute gift. And the thing is, the reason you start on that soft tire is looking for that. So I mean, they were putting themselves in the opportunity to find it. I think if that doesn't happen, I think Scotty wins that race by an absolute mile. I mean, I thought he was the fastest car on track when you take out general strategy, and then him having to do like I'll say a full stint, a green stint on then the green tire. Things I wasn't surprised at somehow was the podium. Like I wasn't surprised that all those guys were on the podium. I thought Joseph's team did a really good job to go from, I think he was P10. They had a fuel issue, which Tim gave me some insight into what happened there. They've remedied that. They're not much concerned. But I think they actually were really impressed with Joseph with his fuel saving and trying to communicate that to him without it becoming like this, siren that there's a problem. And then, Dixon always seems to find his way to the front there. And then same with Palou
He's never
because
won. He's never won around there, though. You know that. That's
oh,
kryptonite.
I think that'll be his fifth second place
Yeah,
at St. Pete now.
yeah.
And that's what I mean. I was on the track walk with Scotty and or Dixon, and I said to him like, no disrespect, but like I know your history now like better than like anybody else's, and like you've had like 7 podiums here, now 8, and it's like what is it like? What is the thing that's going to get you over there? And one of the talking points following the race was that his
Yeah.
radio wasn't working, which that's such an interesting take. And so my hot take on that is drivers normally say that when they're looking for someone to be like, good job, like that was awesome. And I know Dixon doesn't need any praise from anybody because I mean he's one of the best to ever race an IndyCar. But I actually think that cost him the win because if they could have pitted on the lap that they wanted to, not based purely off of the
He comes
fuel,
out ahead of Palou.
he comes out ahead and he probably wins the race. But then it's like this, Dixon and St. Pete. It's like, how many more small random things are going to happen to him that he doesn't get the win?
It's just mad. Palou doing Palou things. I know we always say that, but he has a habit when it comes. I think he did it a few years ago when he's fifth, sixth place, comes to the last round of pit stops, somehow manages to
Bam.
come out in. We can talk about him and we will talk about him, but for me, I like. There's 2 talking points I want to take away. I like Christian Lundgaard in Papaya. I said that before the season started. I think if he can build some momentum, he's got that continuum about him in terms of regulating his emotion, that kind of thing, to really start to build that momentum into a sort of championship winning campaign. I think he'll put Pato under pressure. When Pato's under pressure, we've seen him fluctuate. So that's a talking point. And then also Andretti snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. We've seen that from them for whatever reason it is. And I know, they're very, very slender margins. They might be different, so they're not mounting mistakes. They're different mistakes, but they're still mistakes. And if they're going to mount a championship campaign this year, beat the likes of Team Penske and Chip Ganassi, they're going to have to be perfect all the time.
Well, they are. And one thing about, especially like Marcus Ericsson, at St. Pete, he'd never finished outside the top 10 without having a mechanical failure. He did it again this year. Probably my guy who is flying the most just generally under the radar, who seems to be able to really consolidate well, maximize well. Kyle Kirkwood that way as well. So then you look at it and you go, okay, well, I still think that Colton is probably the fastest driver in that staple. Yet, man, it sucks that so many times you look at where he finishes and you're like, what happened? Like, how did that happen? And in St. Pete, fine, it was a pit stop, that kind of really derailed their race and whatnot. And it's hard, man, and especially when
But it was 2
you go
things,
back to like,
right? It was the right rear and then the fuel.
yeah. So, man, I think when one happens, it then immediately everyone's heightened. Everyone's anxiety goes up a bit, and then I'm sure as a team they know that they've had a lot of fast cars and not a lot of the results to like go with how quick their cars are. I think the thing for me is obviously it's early in the season. It's not a moment of like panic, but things so quickly become a trend, and then later on in the season.
Track one way or you track the other way.
And then later on in the year, it's like, okay, well, we're missing 5 points. And you're like, well, you remember St. Pete when you really should have been in the top five and you ended up, well, actually, I'm not even sure where he did, finish in the end. And then my tidbit on Christian is, especially having been teammates with him, I mean, he's very good at a lot of things, but I would say his strengths to me as a driver really come down to probably three major things. One, he is fantastic at being able to extract lap time out of any car. He's very good at maximizing on one lap, and the level that he adapts, I think, is absolutely second to none. So he is a really fantastic guy. He's going to be super strong all season, I'm sure. And also, side note, I thought that Nolan Siegel did a very good job.
Yeah,
So I think Papaya, that whole Papaya staple at McLaren, going into the year, felt like people had maybe not put them on the same category from a driver lineup perspective. And I thought actually at St. Pete, they're more than ready for this challenge ahead.
going back to Christian, I think he was one of the 19 drivers that tested at Barber last week. One of the comments that he said was the car is still very much built around Pato, and he likes it a bit more on the knife edge, and he can deal with that and still extract the lap time. Christian doesn't want the car to be on the knife edge, so he's still, with the speed that he's got, I mean, he was third quickest at Barber. He's still got more to come, he feels, because once he gets that into a sweet spot where he's more comfortable within it to extract the lap time, he says that he'll improve furthermore.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, me and Christian are very good friends. I mean, we spend a lot of time in the week together. So, I mean, he's probably one of the guys I know the most about, from being teammates with him to also just being friends with him. You have not seen, even though it was a great performance at St. Pete, I mean, he has not peaked even remotely yet. And, what makes Pato so good is he can get in it. I would put him in any car and know that he will find a way to be fast. Now, when I say that, that is not me saying Christian can't do that. He's already done it. He did it this weekend. He was the fastest of the McLaren cars in qualifying. He finished the best out of all of them. And that's still in a car that he isn't totally comfortable with yet. Do we praise people on the fact that they can drive on a knife edge more than another guy? Well, it doesn't matter. The end result is we praise the guy who
Mm.
wins, and who is able to extract it. So I think on the road courses and the street circuits, I think Christian is gonna really, really, really be strong. I would love to see what happens on the ovals. I think that's really going to be where Pato continues to shine. That's my personal feeling on it. And I think some of that is probably because he is able to really drive the car on that knife edge that he needs to. And
At
I mean, he might have
230 miles an hour.
and he might have the fastest hands in the whole of,
Ninja hands,
IndyCar
that's what they
racing.
call him.
What's that?
They call him Ninja Hands.
Well, yeah, and the thing is, what I want to say to people, when you watch Pato, he's still quite smooth. It's just the frequency of what his like hands are prepared to move is just very high. So I think when you balance all that together and you get that cauldron bubbling and whatnot, I, I think they will end up going down two different paths from a setup perspective. I'll be interested to see where Nolan kind of leans, if he ends up being kind of where Christian is or where Pato ends up being. But I think that is going to be a really interesting team to continue watching. And, in some regards, perhaps they've come into the season more under the radar than what they have on previous years. But I actually like that. And I really think that Nolan could have been in the Fast Six in St. Pete too. I think he's a future star, no doubt. So I'm pretty high on the McLaren team right now. I think they're going to do some really good things, and a little bit like some of the Andretti scenarios, they just need to get that final result. And to me, that's where Team Penske and Chip Ganassi Racing have the edge of like the big four teams right now. they just seem to get that end result.
So, talking of end results, let's look ahead very quickly to thermal. We talked about the tyres. What else are we going to talk about in terms of standout performance? You know, we talked about Scotty Mack at the top of this chat. Penske, Scotty Mack. There's just something about that.
Yeah.
You know, that relationship. He has to be a championship contender. Colton
He
Herta's
is.
in there as well. There's so many names that you could pick out of the hat going into thermal. I know it's only round 2 of the championship, but it's really hard with your sort of new pundit's hat on. You know, when people go, well, where are you gonna? Where are your talking points? Where are you going to put your money? It's actually quite hard.
It's hard. I think IndyCar racing is the best racing that people could watch right now. Because if I showed you what the top 10 could be, you are going to leave out some really talented drivers every single weekend. And, one thing that we haven't even mentioned yet, Felix Rosenquist, who was flying at St. Pete, he was very fast at thermal last year, a guy who can also absolutely get it done. So, every weekend you're going to have somebody, and not that I think Fro is my unexpected guy. I mean, actually, probably expect him to be starting in the top 10 like
He
most
had quite a
weekends.
big
But
kick last week. Did you see that? He had quite a big shot.
I did see that, yeah, Barber. Yeah, he had a big one. He had one in the morning and then another one in the afternoon. So not quite sure what happened there, but yeah, he had a pretty tasty one in practice. But I think for thermal, storylines are really that have caught my attention. Rinus VeeKay, absolute wickedly fast driver, got let go from Carpenter. I know that's all been put out there. Last minute with Dale, which I know super well and a lot about, and had a great result. You can't knock it. And actually, he's my first interview when I get to thermal. It's already set up and prepared, and I want to dive into his psyche about what does the off season look like for you, and then you're able to put all that aside and still come deliver a good result. So who else am I looking at this weekend?
He
Well,
can thank you for all of the hard work and endeavour you put into providing that platform
well,
for him.
we put in. I think actually our street circuit car throughout last year really did get quite good. So I wasn't totally surprised to see that result happen. I mean, I thought that was good, and I think their oval car's good too. So I think Arenas is going to be pretty strong this year, but you know, guy we talk a lot about, and rightly so, is Will Power. I think you see Will have a bounce back weekend. He was fastest at Barber. Um, I think that, and I don't want to be that person who speculates early. And actually, I probably have been the person who is downplaying some of these things, but I would love to see Will get his season off to a better start than what you saw in St. Pete, because I know he's in a contract year, and look, even though he's won the 500, he's a series champion. When you want to race and you want to be there, you're going to feel some anxiety and tension to want to stay in the seat that you want to be in. And if that's the 12 for him, his championship starts in thermal. And I hate to say it because this is going to be like, people are going to be like, this is the least surprising pick of all. But Palou won last year. He does unbelievable things with the tyres, and his degradation just is exceptional. Even within his own team,
He's good
Palou's
on
going
the
to finish on
black.
the podium.
If it's a black race, that's where he's so good. It's his ability to get the lap time out on the blacks and still.
He sometimes does a strategy that I look at, and I'm like, I actually don't know how you made that work.
Yeah.
And for people in Formula One, it'd be like watching someone, go twice as long on the soft tyre at a very competitive stance. And by the way, everyone is kind of within a similar performance car. So you can't even just say it's the car. Like, there's clearly something that he is doing with, whether it's just the relationship he has with his engineer and the minor setup stuff. But I mean, the least surprising prediction I'm going to have this weekend is that Palou is on the podium
It's
again.
interesting because in that Chip Ganassi stable, you've kind of got Palou doing magical things with this black tyre that no one else can do. And then Scott Dixon doing magical things with fuel numbers that no one else can do. They're both in the
I mean, I often look, think about things like that, and how good it was when I was with MSR and was with teammates with Colton for that bit of time, and Alexander Rossi for that bit of time, and Ryan Hunter-Reay, who is actually going to be my teammate again at the 500. And people should not underestimate how much you learn. So for people like Kiffin Simpson, being teammates with you're going to already say that Palou's going to go down as one of the best ever IndyCar drivers too, because the level that he's dominated, in the last, 4 years, let's say, at a time where IndyCar racing is perhaps the most competitive that it's ever been. I mean, it's quite special, really. And, with their technical partner, well, Chip Ganassi Racing, their technical partnership with MSR, I think that's a really great thing for them as well. Now, their test at Barber might not have been awesome, but they were very fast actually at Thermal last year. And although it's not a rivalry trying to spark, they actually were the top Ganassi affiliated cars at St. Pete, both cars in the Fast Six, only team to have two cars in it. So,
They did the
and this
same
is
with
what
Andretti, though, didn't they? They were super quick in qualifying.
yeah.
Um,
And this is what I said to Fox already. I'm like, guys, like your storylines, there's loads. There's so many big ones and fun ones, and it's still early in the season, and it's too early to be like, well, that guy's going to be under pressure if this happens and that happens and all these things. But one of my favorite things that happened at St. Pete, not to pivot there because we can make this about thermal, and you mentioned him earlier. This is Scotty Mack. I love that he has dispelled this myth that you have a child and then go slower because I thought he was my star driver from St. Pete.
yeah,
I know he hit the wall in practice or whatever, but he bounced back from that super well. I feel like he had a tasty margin as well in qualifying. I thought he drove a fantastic race, and I'm just happy that, I hate that myth. I hate that it's even a talking point, and I love that essentially he just pushed it completely
you're
away.
absolutely right. For outright pace, it's hard to look past Scotty Mack and Team Penske. Colton Herter and Andretti are right there. And then you've got the might of Palou and, Scott Dixon. He's not a fading star. He could have won at
Could have won.
Berg. So much
He's
to look
not,
forward
man.
to.
Like,
So much to
one
look
thing
forward
was, yeah, sorry. One thing that was really cool at St. Pete was watching him do his track walk with Dario and how much effort this guy still puts in. Like, he's not a guy who's resting on his speed laurels or anything like that. Like, he is there, like, hustling. The only thing this weekend that I would be concerned for Andretti Autosport is tyre deg
to.
because they do seem quite hard on tyres in the past.
Yeah, and that you could say the same thing for Arrow McLaren as well. Right,
Totally.
Jack, you've been an absolute star. You're a star with the microphone in your hand. You're a star
Oh,
in the
cheers.
car. We're going to see you at the Indianapolis 500, so no doubt we'll get to talk to you about driving very, very soon. I'm also looking forward to you handling your first ever Will Power interview when he's just got out of the car, little
Yeah.
under the collar, and we're going down to pit lane to Jack Harvey, who's going to manage that situation gracefully.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he's in my pit allocation this week, but I did have Joseph last at St. Pete, and he looked a bit tasty at one point. Like he had a face like thunder, and he just looked up at me and smiled, and I was like, "Okay, we're in the clear." But the bit that people don't know, and I'm going to thank you so everyone can see it now, Tom, you were so awesome with your advice because I was nervous, and you knew I was nervous before St. Pete, and I really appreciate the voice notes that you sent and the info and whatnot. So I really appreciate you helping me, not just whether it's, as a friend, but also as a colleague. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you're a good man, buddy, and it's always a pleasure to help good people. You did a great job. Well, listen, Jack Harvey,
Thank you.
thanks so much. We will see you on our screens this Sunday at Thermal. You can watch all the action